some questions,
Yeah,
if
for
that's
sure.
cool. Yeah. One of the things I wanted to know is
Mm,
some of the themes in your book, like, for example, kind of the fakery of consumerism and like thinking about the environment and stuff. Like,
mm.
are those things that really concern you? Like, are you sort of someone who's really kind of wanting to get active with environmental issues, or like, do you see yourself like,
I mean, I think something that I wrestle with a lot is feeling inactive and feeling a bit impotent in relation to those things. And I think also particularly when I look at what it is that I do with my time, and sometimes there's that impulse where it's like, oh, like all these kind of hideous things are happening in the world, and I'm spending my time writing poems. Then what do I do with that, or
mm,
things? So I think a lot of what's in there isn't necessarily indicative of. I mean, it's indicative of like the level of concern that I have for kind of where we're going economically, where we're going ecologically,
yeah,
but it's also I think maybe wrestling with and I think we all wrestle with. I think even people on the front lines of climate activism wrestle with not feeling like they're doing enough.
yeah, definitely.
So I think it's more coming from there.
And so, do you find poetry is quite a good way to explore some of that stuff, like to like wrestle with it, or not necessarily?
I don't know if it helps wrestle with it, but I think what I'm trying to do is acknowledge the fact that we all, maybe not all of us, but that a great many of us do wrestle with it in that way, and I'm trying to create something that consoles that feeling of wrestling
Mm, mm,
and kind of acknowledges it as a sort of broad experience.
And what about like with the autobiographical side?
Mm.
Like people probably ask you about it. Like, did you? How did it feel? Like some of the stories can be like, quite confronting and like
Mm.
revealing. Like, is it? Are there some that are kind of a mix of fiction and autobiography, or is it like how's the mix
Sure.
there?
I mean, certainly, I think it's all the things that are kind of ripped from my life. A lot of the images in them are not necessarily like, sort of accurate representations of like things and like a lot of the images are kind of poetic and fictional and drawn, but they're operating to try and communicate like a true emotional impulse.
So is it like tell the truth but tell it slant?
Yeah, tell
Yeah.
it slant, but like not at all with the objective of obscuring the truth. I think you're right. Like I try to be revealing, I try to be vulnerable, and certainly
mm,
when I was writing Girls and Boy, and I'd recently gone through this shift of for a very long time I never wrote about myself. I'd never write about sort of autobiographical things, and
mm,
then I was like, no, actually, the self is something to write about. That's a valid source of content.
mm,
And I think particularly with such a short kind of chat book,
yeah.
it's kind of okay for that content to exist in that sort of breadth of space.
Mm, mm,
Um, and so I'd kind of recently come into this space of wanting to write about myself, but or feeling okay about that. But
mm.
certainly, yeah, some of the imagery isn't necessarily true, but it's trying to be like it's trying to communicate the emotion to someone else.
Yeah.
So you sort of have to draw on more general imagery.
Totally, and I know that you do a little bit of spoken word stuff and sort of
Yeah.
like get out and do like Enough Said, which is an Wollongong. You guys should check out definitely if you're in the area. But how is it? How is the process of the book? Like, did you find like actually publishing the work in the written form, was that different?
I definitely see the work that I write for spoken word and the work that I write for print is different. I know some people don't, and
Mm,
there's a crossover in that, and I think the sort of the like the rhythm and the tone of things that I would write for spoken word carries across into some of the work in printed work. But
what do
yeah,
you think? What is it essentially that's different? Like when when you're crafting something
I
for the
guess
stage or the
well,
page.
it's about the forum that you're communicating in, and the way that someone's going to receive that information. Whereas when it's spoken word, it's so like immediate and visceral, and you're trying to like talk to someone directly. Whereas I think when it's on the page, you have more time to sort of savor an image,
Mm,
and there's more sort of, I guess you can be a little more obscure, or you can make your audience work a little harder. But that's
mm,
quite like I find that a really enjoyable experience when I'm reading a book of poetry, when the imagery kind of makes you work a bit. That's really nice. Whereas if you do that maybe in a spoken word setting, it's just confusing and it's hard to follow.
Yeah, that's true. Because some of the stuff that you see on the page, you can it's a visual, almost like a visual
You
gag.
can see the resonance between images. You can see
Yeah.
the way that like this
Yeah.
recalls back to something in an earlier line.
Yeah, yeah. Or enjambment, where it's like a different meaning, like
Yeah,
with
exactly.
the lines and yeah, and it must be fun to play around with doing the two different types of sort of what would you call them, formats or
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And which do you prefer? Like, if you had to choose one, do you have one that you prefer, or like
I
swing towards like?
I think I'm more invested in the work that I'm writing for the page. But that said, I mean, don't make me choose. You know what I mean? Because it's like I really, really value what spoken word does. I really value it as the way that it makes poetry accessible and real, and it makes poetry exist in bars and pubs and cafes across this country. And the way that it brings people together. It brings people together who are interested in art and poetry.
For sure.
And I love that culture, and I would choose that culture over the culture that's associated with queer poetry.
The community. And on that note, I'll pop the links to Enough Said and also Girls on Key in the comments down below for you guys. And the last question, I just wanted to ask you about the title and like how you kind of chose the work for the book, and like was there kind of like a unifying principle when you did that?
Yeah, so the main thing that I was concerned about was consistency of the voice and the tone, because I feel like my voices had kind of flicked around a lot, but it's predominantly work that I wrote over the same period of time, which was kind of like 3 months over the summer from the end of 2016 to the start of 2017. And I kind of wrote it all in like half an hour slices of time in the morning before I went to work. And
that's dedication.
Yeah, it was summer and the sun's up early and it makes me feel great, and I just had to take advantage of it.
That's good.
So it's kind of unified by the period of time that I was writing in.
Cool.
Mainly, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's a great book, and everybody should definitely check it out. Also put the link for you. And also, if you are writing and you want to submit to their chapbook series, it's still open for submissions until July. So
July 1st,
yeah,
I think.
July 1st. So check that out. Make sure you send in your manuscripts. You might, they're really great, really great with their chapbooks. So yeah, thanks guys. And that was Emily Crocker, and we'll see you in the next video.